It was just a few months ago that the specter of runaway inflation loomed large over the global economy, striking fear into the hearts of central bankers and keeping them up at night. Price pressures were spiraling out of control in the wake of the pandemic, threatening to unravel decades of hard-won monetary stability. Interest rates shot up at a frenzied pace as policymakers scrambled to restore order and slay the inflationary dragon. But as we enter the second quarter of 2023, a dramatic shift is underway. From the sleek financial centers of Zurich and London to the power corridors of Washington, D.C., a new sentiment is taking hold. The great inflation scare is dissipating. The economic narrative is being rewritten before our very eyes. Consider the surprising events of the past week alone. In a move that would have been unthinkable just months prior, the traditionally hawkish Swiss National Bank slashed interest rates by a quarter point. This watershed decision represented nothing less than a declaration of victory over rampant inflation, in the words of SNB President Thomas Jordan. Across the English Channel, cracks appeared in the united front at the Bank of England, with two arch-hawks defecting from the ranks of rate hikers. But it was the Federal Reserve, that preeminent guardian of price stability, which really caught the market's attention. Defying skeptics who pointed to stubbornly elevated inflation data, the Fed doubled down on its projected path of 3 interest rate cuts for 2023. An inconceivable prospect at the height of the inflation frenzy, the notion of imminent policy easing is now being embraced as a plausible reality on the horizon. The great psychological pivot is underway. Having stared into the abyss of 1970s-style stagflation, policymakers are allowing themselves to breathe a tentative sigh of relief. Inflation, the economic scourge that warped expectations and upended conventional wisdom, finally appears to be receding into the background. On the surface, the numbers justify the cautious optimism. G7 inflation has slowed to its lowest level since spring 2021, clocking in at 2.9% as of January. Scratch deeper, however, and a more nuanced reality emerges, one which suggests the saga is far from over. For one, central bankers remain distinctly reluctant to get too far over their skis. ECB Chief Christine Lagarde insists monetary leaders cannot pre-commit to a particular path beyond an initial rate cut, likely penciled in for June. Her Swiss counterpart echoed that hesitancy to provide light at the end of the easing tunnel. There are also pockets of stubbornness that could ultimately prove the inflationistas right. In Iceland, where rates sit at a lofty 9.25%, the central bank chief isn't even entertaining cuts until May at the earliest. Across the Nordic periphery in Norway, policymakers believe any easing remains at least 6 months away. The overarching message is that while the temperatures may be cooling after the first scorching bout of inflation in a generation, the healing process is likely to be gradual and uneven. Monetary authorities are by no means declaring total victory and preparing to go back to the low-rate environments that prevailed pre-pandemic. After all, powerful residual forces remain which could perpetuate elevated price pressures for years to come, from restructured global supply chains to rebounding fiscal activism. As one expert at HSBC Asset Management remarked, "We may be headed for a future where the new normal for interest rates settles around 3%, a far cry from the near-zero territory of the 2010s. So as the great pivot plays out and the initial euphoria over beaten inflation passes, sober realities will return to the fore. Restoring price stability is a marathon, not a sprint. And the race is far from over. For everyday citizens grappling with higher borrowing costs and stretched budgets, respite may be in sight, but a quick return to the economic status quo ante seems improbable. The era of cheap money has likely been consigned to the history books. Meanwhile, for those in finance, adapting to an evolved landscape with higher rate baselines will be the permanent challenge on the horizon. Pricing risk, allocating capital, managing portfolios, these core functions will all require a recalibration for a new era that may defy old conventions. At its core, the unfolding reappraisal is emblematic of an economic paradigm shift, one which demands open-mindedness and versatility from all quarters. Knee-jerk responses rooted in outdated assumptions will likely prove misguided in the face of uncharted terrain. The great inflation scare of the 2020s has ushered in a period of uncertainty to match the prolonged period of macroeconomic calm that preceded it. As ever in times of upheaval, Society's greatest assets will be humility in the face of unforeseen forces and an adaptive capacity to navigate uncharted waters. For in the wise words of a proverb, the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. Hold on to your hats as we brace for the next phase of an economy reshaped. The great inflation nightmare may be fading, but a new waking reality awaits. And only the judicious and nimble-minded are likely to thrive.